Welcome to Endwalker. In this guide, we'll go over all of the actions the new Arcanist and Summoner learn from level 1 to 50 in order. We'll go over how each action is meant to be used and when applicable, the recommended way to use it. Please refer to the video in the top right corner for explanations of role actions specifically. It is up to date with only a few corrections added in a pinned comment. Ruin is your starting spell. It functions as your filler spell that you default to casting, either when it is empowered, which we'll get back to in a bit, or when there is nothing else more important to do. Its cast time enables you to fit one ability after every cast without delaying your spell casts. At level 2, you learn the spell Summon Carbuncle, which, as implied, summons a carbuncle at your side. Carbuncle will not do anything on its own other than following you, but it is necessary to bring Carbuncle with you as it assists you with certain spells and abilities. For instance, you also learn the ability Radiant Aegis, which commands Carbuncle to shield you for a significant amount of damage. You should use this ability when you're either actively taking damage or are about to. Because the duration is very long, you can benefit from using it in advance if you know you will take damage. At level 4, you learn the spell Physic, which is a basic healing spell. In fact, it still scales with mind rather than intelligence, so as your level grows, this spell will become less useful. At level 6, you learn the spell Aethercharge. While this spell does not do any damage on its own, it significantly boosts the damage of your Ruin casts for a while, and additionally gives you a Ruby Arcanum. While affected by the damage buff from Aethercharge, you should prioritize using Ruin over any other spells to make the most of the boost. Aethercharge's cooldown is affected by spell speed, so its cooldown will always be 24 times the recast time of Ruin itself. You also learn the spell Summon Ruby. This instant spell, at the cost of Ruby Arcanum, summons a Ruby Carbuncle which shortly after hits your target for a good amount of damage. Ruby Carbuncle also empowers you with 2 stacks of Fire Attunement, which you have 30 seconds to spend. To spend Attunement, you are given the spell Gemshine. This spell changes form depending on what kind of attunement you have and spends 1 attunement per cast. You should try your best to spend all attunements as a priority over all other spells, although you should keep in mind that you have plenty of time to do so it is possible to delay it. When you have Fire Attunement, Gemshine turns into Ruby Ruin, a spell with more potency than your standard Ruin. However, it has a base cast time of 2.8 seconds, requiring you to take a greater risk when casting it. This means that in terms of combat, your current rotation involves using Aethercharge on cooldown, then casting Ruin repeatedly for a while, and then summon Ruby, then a couple of Ruby Ruins. After that, you simply cast Ruin until Aethercharge comes back. At level 10, you learn the ability Energy Drain, which does some upfront damage and gives you 2 charges of Aether Flow. Try to use this ability on cooldown in between Ruin casts. You can also fit it after Aethercharge or summon Ruby. The concept of casting abilities between spells is called weaving, and you can fit 1 ability after a 1.5 second cast time and 2 abilities after instant cast spells. If you want to learn more about weaving, please see the video in the top right corner. Aether Flow charges are used on Fester, which you also learn at level 10. This ability simply does some immediate damage and should be used in between spells the same way as Energy Drain. The cooldown of Energy Drain being 1 minute means you have plenty of time to find a good opportunity. Be aware that you should have spent both of your Aether Flow charges before using Energy Drain again, should you ever be in a position where you can make this choice. At level 12, you learn the spell Resurrection. This spell brings your target back to life, but is expensive to use and takes a while to cast. A resurrected player will have their main attributes, like strength, reduced for a while, but they will also be completely impervious to damage for 5 seconds, unless they do anything other than movement. For the most part, you should only use Resurrection alongside the role action Swift Cast, which you learn at level 18, as this skips the incredibly long cast time. At level 15, you learn the trait Enhanced Aethercharge, which upgrades Aethercharge to also grant you Topaz Arcanum when cast. You also learn the spell Summon Topaz. This spell is very similar to Summon Ruby, with the main differences being that it grants 4 stacks of Earth Attunement instead, which are spent on Gemshine in the same way. With Earth Attunement, Gemshine turns into Topaz Ruin, which, while being instant, for now deals the same damage as regular Ruin. This means that if you know you will have to move for a bit, it may be beneficial to time summon Topaz and its Topaz ruins for that segment of a fight. The order in which you choose to spend your Arcanums are up to you, as long as you make your way through spending all of them before Aethercharge becomes ready again. At level 18, you learn the role action and ability Swiftcast. While the main purpose of this ability normally is to pair with your resurrection spell, the summoner in particular can benefit from utilizing this action as part of your attack rotation. Specifically, due to Ruby Ruin's cast time of 2.8 paired with a cooldown of 2.5, if you use Swiftcast on one of the Ruby Ruin casts, you gain 0.3 seconds, which indirectly is a damage output boost. It also alleviates the issue of a long cast time where you cannot move. You can do this simply by using Summon Ruby, Swiftcast, Ruby Ruin. Since you get 1 Ruby Arcanum per minute and 1 Swiftcast per minute, this is always available on time, as long as you summon your carbuncles in the same order every time. At level 22, you learn the trait Enhanced Aethercharge 2, which again upgrades Aethercharge to this time also grant you Emerald Arcanum, which is of course spent on Summon Emerald. Summon Emerald is similar to the other 2 summons and grants 4 Wind Attunements. With Wind Attunement, Gemshine turns into Emerald Ruin, which is instant, but with a cooldown of only 1.5 seconds rather than 2.5, which means you can cast all 4 of these ruins in only 6 seconds. While the potency is lower than regular Ruin, the speed at which you can cast these attacks mean they average out to a higher potency per second, so don't be fooled, this is a boost to your damage output. At this point, your rotation is expanded a bit. You still use Aethercharge on cooldown, and you can use Energy Drain and Festus while you Aethercharge, and while you spam cast Ruin during the damage buff. After the buff ends, you should make your way through using a summon, then casting Gemshine to spend the attunements, and then casting a new summon until you're through all 3 summons. Then, you repeatedly cast Ruin until the rotation begins anew. At level 26, you learn the spells Outburst and Precious Brilliance. Outburst does damage in an area of effect, or AoE for short, and replaces Ruin on 3 or more targets. Precious Brilliance functions as an AoE version of Gemshine and replaces it on 3 targets in the same way. In particular, Gemshine turns into Ruby Outburst, Topaz Outburst, and Emerald Outburst, which are quite literally AoE versions of the Gemshine attacks, with the exact same cast time related properties and so on. As such, both Outburst and Precious Brilliance replace Ruin and Gemshine on 3 or more targets. As a side note, you also learned the role action Lucid Dreaming at level 24. This is not a super important ability for summoners, although on prolonged fights, the mana recovery of this ability can be incredibly helpful, so try to use this if your mana drops below 7000. At level 30, Ruin permanently upgrades to Ruin 2, which does slightly more damage. At the same time, Ruby Ruin, Topaz Ruin and Emerald Ruin are upgraded in the same way, increasing their potencies slightly. This does not really change anything for your rotation, however. Also at level 30, doing your class quest line will eventually lead you to the Summoner quest, which is available once you complete the main scenario quest, Self-Management. Once you unlock the Summoner, remember to equip your Soul Crystal to change into the Summoner job. The starting trait of the Summoner is Ruby Summoning Mastery, which permanently replaces your Summon Ruby with Summon Ifrit, which makes you instead summon an Ifrit Eggy to deliver a significantly more powerful hit on your target. This does not change your rotation, although it might mean the Ruby Arcanum is worth more damage for the time being, and you can prioritize your usage accordingly. At level 35, Summon Topaz is replaced by Summon Titan, which is improved in the exact same way as Summon Ruby. This does not change your rotation. At level 40, you learn the ability Painflare, which is an AoE alternative to Festa. When there are at least 3 targets, Painflare replaces Festa. On 2 targets, they do exactly the same amount of damage, so you can choose which way you prefer to spread the damage. At level 45, Summon Emerald is replaced by Summon Garuda. Garuda Eggy specifically does a significantly weaker attack, but in an area of effect, rather than a single target strike. This does not really change your rotation, although it may benefit you to use Garuda first on AoE and last on single target. At level 50, you learn the trait Enkindle, which both adds even more damage to your summon's entrance attacks, but also adds an AoE component to the attacks. Keep in mind that Garuda now does the same damage in the same way as both Ifrit and Titan, so prioritizing it based on number of targets is no longer important for this particular spell. Your rotation is not changed in any other ways besides this, but it does mean the summons do increase significantly in value on AoE. One small note to keep in mind is that Ifrit, and only Ifrit, does a frontal cone attack, while Titan and Garuda do a circle AoE around them. To round off, let's reiterate the single target and AoE rotations. Always make sure that Carbuncle is summoned, as you need it to cast Aethercharge. For single target, start by casting Ruin and Weave Energy Drain alongside it. Now that you are in combat, cast Aethercharge and Weave Fester. Then you cast Ruin and Weave another Fester, and then simply cast Ruin until the Aethercharge buff runs out. When the Aethercharge buff runs out, start working on spending the Arcanums. For this example, I will simply walk through them in order, but the order does not really matter. First, cast Summon Ifrit and then cast Ruby Ruin twice. Optionally, you can use Swift Cast after Summon Ifrit to make the first Ruby Ruin instant to skip some cast time. Then, cast Summon Titan and cast Topaz Ruin 4 times in a row. Then finally cast Summon Garuda and cast Emerald Ruin again 4 times in a row. If you need to move, consider timing either Garuda or Titan for these occasions. Additionally, regular Ruin's cast time is short enough that you can walk a fair bit after each cast. If you need more movement than that, you can also benefit from Slidecasting, although I will refer you to my previously mentioned guide on weaving for this, as it also covers Slidecasting. As soon as there are 3 or more targets, you replace regular Ruin by Outburst, Gemshine by Precious Brilliance, and Fester by Painflare. No other major changes do you need to consider against more enemies. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the new summoner and its much more approachable design, and if you have any questions or find something a bit confusing, please leave a comment down below. Fun fact, before Endwalker, summoner used to be centered around damage over time effects, and their summons would even attack on their own without being ordered. Isn't that wild?